Thanks, Paul. Thanks, everyone, for obviously coming out. Good to see so many familiar faces. I know you guys have been coming to Lucid Revolution and Lucid meetups and all of that for a good long time now. So obviously, great to see so much enthusiasm around Lucid sustained over the years. And I think as you've seen in a number of talks already and in what you'll see in a number of talks today, Lucid isn't standing still. It's moving forward. It's making great inroads into handling bigger and bigger query loads as well as bigger and bigger data sizes. So with that, what I'm going to talk a little bit about today is some of the, as Paul alluded to, a new product that we're launching. I'm going to try not to be too heavy on the product side, but give you a little bit of an insight into the actual technical details, trying to keep my technical hat on as much as possible while still at least letting you know that we do have some new capabilities out. So essentially, I wanted to start off a little bit with, I think, some of the pain that you guys are all working on solving. If you've been in the big data space or you've had a pulse in the last 2 years in technology, you know that big data is all the rage. So anyways, I wanted to start off, I'm not going to go into quoting too much around all of the different pundits, what they say about data. I've come down to an algorithm that you can fill in for any given analyst out there, basically saying X amount of data growth in the next X days, months, years, and most of it is unstructured. As a person who has cut his teeth in natural language processing and search over the years, I find the word unstructured a bit incorrect. If it was truly unstructured, right, we would just have random bits on disk. The English language or any other language is anything but unstructured. The fact of the matter is, right, that we just don't fully understand the structure. Or we as humans understand it, but we are having a hard time expressing that in computer form, right? So let's maybe throw out the word unstructured and think about other ones. I've heard people say multi-structured or polystructured or semi-structured, etc. All of that's well and good, and I think it's what search engines in many ways are designed to help with. So we'll talk some more about that as we go here. I think the other interesting thing that you're starting to see is that we are really living in this age of paranoia around data, right? You've all been tasked, I'm sure, with how do I make sure I keep all my data? How do I collect it all? What if I lose something? Where does it go? What if I can't store it long enough? What if I don't have access to it? How do I secure it? And then at the end of the day, the business guys are also asking you, boy, that's really expensive. What if I can't afford, what if we can't really afford to do that? And then the next day they come back to you and say, well, forget that stuff I said yesterday about not being able to afford to do it. We have to do this, so we're just going to go ahead and do it. And then last but not least, and I think this is where we get into a bit more of the theme that I want to talk about is how do you make sense of all of that data? And I think as you guys all know, having done search for a long time, is that search is one of the key enabling capabilities when it comes to making sense of all of this stuff. So, you've probably, like I said, if you've had a pulse in the last few years, you know the big data premise, and you've heard the promises, right? Well, you can go out and do large-scale data collection. We can go put petabytes or exabytes or whatever else amount of data into HDFS or into some NoSQL storage, etc. If you have a really good system with no single points of failure, etc., you can make sure that you don't have any data loss. Of course, you've got to double up on everything because you want to have backups and all of that stuff too, or maybe that's built into your system. And of course, with these great tools, you can do long-term storage. You often hear people say, well, let's store it all, right? So you can just keep all of your data, it's all right there, and you can run MapReduce over it, and you're all good to go, right? And of course, hey, it's open source. Open source is free, right? So it's very affordable. Right? All we got to do is hire a bunch of rocket scientists, and you're good to go for a few more years, right? And then last but not least, how many people in here have the title of data scientist? No one. How many people would like to have that title? Yeah, there's a few. It's all the rage as well, right? So there's this new science that we're talking about that's delivering all these new insights that we're figuring out. And wouldn't it be great if we could just look at all of this data and go and crunch it all down into some useful things and we all make more money, save the world, et cetera, right? I think we're still working on that promise a bit. But you're starting to see more and more tools come out, and with that, I'd like to think about boy, I'm hitting this thing too many times. Think about, how do I think about that problem? How do we think about that problem at Lucid Imagination? Why do we keep using this thing, search, discovery, and analytics, or SDA, as you'll hear me say, so that I can be fully acronym compliant in this talk? What is search, discovery, and analytics, and why do I think it helps solve the problem that we're trying to solve? SDA in many ways comes out of a lot of conversations that I've had with people like you in this room, as well as what we see in the big data market, as well as what we have in terms of our own vision around where we think search is headed. Routinely see, of course, people want good keyword search capabilities. You all know that. That's why you've chosen Lucene. Lucene has tried and true capabilities around search. They've been in practice for 30 or 40 years. You can all do vector space model calculations in your head, cosine differentials or cosine differences, et cetera, right? So we know how to do keyword search pretty well, right? And that's kind of the bare minimum that people need. But so then you start to say, okay, well, what do I want to be able to do on top of that? How do I actually get content up to my users when they don't exactly know how to express their queries? So then there becomes this discovery aspect to what you're trying to do, right? How can I give recommendations based on what people have seen and done in the past so that I can help new users find the right product or the right document, et cetera? Or perhaps, you're a large company with, 100,000 people, and you want to be able to figure out who the experts are in your company, right? So you're starting to see some products emerge out of that. You're starting to see some companies who are actually building this in-house, where they take all of the content, all of the IMs, all of the emails, everything that happens within that company, and they start to do analysis over all of the things that you guys are talking about, so that when somebody needs that Lucene expert, they can say, oh, Bob over in Russia there is the Lucene expert. You should go talk to him, right? So with that, of course, when you're trying to do those things, it's all query driven, right? You need that real-time, ad hoc access to that content, right? That's what we've all made our bread and butter off over the years, right? And then I think one of the other things a couple of the other things you need, of course, is this notion of aggressive prioritization on importance, right? We've all talked about relevance for a long time. We want to make sure we have our search results high up in the list. I think there's perhaps another level we need to take things to, and that's this notion of importance. I think relevance covers a lot of it, and I'm not trying to coin new terms here, but for me, importance kind of brings more of a sense of urgency to the content that we're dealing with, right? So if you've got 100 different streams coming in from all of the web, your inbox, your Twitter streams, your Facebook updates, all of that, how do you aggressively prioritize that so that I can make sure that the things that are important to me are up towards the top? Right? And then the third part of that bullet, serendipity, that I think helps with this notion of, I think we all have when we're dealing with our email, et cetera, that I'm missing something, right? I'm missing the bigger picture on what all of this content is, right? I need something that helps me find the hidden nuggets in the background. It's maybe not as important as that fire that is burning right now, but it is there, and I want to, when I have some downtime, be able to take a look at it. And the fact of the matter is, when you start to think about how to solve these kind of problems, you very quickly realize that there's just not one single out-of-the-box solution for this. Search is not enough alone. Batch processing is not enough. You really need a lot of different capabilities here, and that's why I like to think of them as search, discovery, and analytics. You need to combine all of these things to create this virtuous cycle whereby you have the ad hoc access that search and discovery gives you, and then analytics is kind of in the background giving you more insight into what your users are doing with that content so that you can feed it back into the search and discovery part of the equation, as well as give your business insight into what people are actually doing with that content, so then you can figure out how to better monetize that, etc. So, I know some of you have built systems like this. What do you actually need in order to do this? Well, of course, you need fast, efficient, scalable search. Anybody know any products that do that? Any open source solutions? Of course, you've got a lot of content already, so you need to be able to do bulk indexing of that. You need to be able to load up all of those petabytes of data that you have. And of course, you also want to be able to bring data in near real time as well. You need things, of course, that if you want to fill in the blank, things like what Hadoop brings to the table here. Large-scale, cost-effective storage. You need large-scale distributed computation as well. In some cases, you also need things like distributed in-memory capabilities, which you're starting to see emerge more and more now, where people want at least a good chunk of the things that are hot in their data to be all in memory so they can operate on them in very efficient and fast ways. You also need things like sampling tools so that us mere mortals who can't process petabytes of data in our sleep can actually look at some amount of that content and make sense of that. And then last but not least, in order to really do a lot of these things at scale, you need natural language processing and machine learning tools which will help you better understand that, right? And I say help you because these things aren't magical, right? Just because I put the words machines and learning together doesn't mean all of a sudden that we have these sentient beings that are going to take over the world from us, or at least not yet. Just some example use cases. I think many of you have these already. Some of the ones that I particularly like, this notion of dark data, yet another buzzword we can fill in around. But basically you see this in a lot of large organizations, especially ones that are doing mergers and acquisitions, et cetera. They have paid a lot of money for storage over the years, and they've put a lot of their content into those systems. And yet they don't really have any deep insight or even any shallow insight into what is actually in there as an organization. Sure, you can find individuals who know about, that particular folder is mine and I've got those documents in it, or these ones over here have some other documents that are useful in it. But as a whole, the organization doesn't really understand what's going on in there. And so you can think about things like forensics, intelligence gathering, risk analysis. All of those are good ways of trying to understand better what's in dark data, right? So for instance, in forensics, I mean, it may be the case that you don't even actually know what the original content, what format it's in. So you need perhaps tools that can help you with that. And we can go on and on down the list here. Everybody's darling these days, social media monitoring, take all of the world's tweets, et cetera, put them into some tool and magically figure out who the people are that like your product or don't like your product. E-commerce, this one I particularly like in the notion of search, discovery, and analytics, because what you routinely see in e-commerce is people are obviously very metric driven, because at the end of the day you can tell how many people put your product into a cart and actually bought something, right? And so the better e-commerce customers out there are constantly testing where and how they can tweak their search algorithms, how they can tweak their discovery algorithms, and then analyzing those results out so they can then go from there and make more money or drive their margins down or better control their inventory and so on. So with that, what we are announcing, obviously, as you've seen and perhaps the press releases, et cetera, is what we're calling Lucidworks Big Data. We are announcing this in beta, meaning that it's essentially limited access right now. The idea essentially behind Lucidworks Big Data is to bring this notion of search, discovery, and analysis to fruition by allowing you to do all of the V's that everybody talks about in big data and essentially have all of your content indexed and searchable when you want it indexed and searchable, and have it in large-scale storage and computation areas when you need it for those kinds of things. One of the things I do like to highlight here, and if you heard me in Barcelona last year, I do want to highlight the user interactions, right? Because I think this is one of the keys to big data and all of the reasons why we're doing these things, right? Because at the end of the day, it's still about the people who are working on this. And at the end of the day, it's all about looking at how users are actually interacting with your content, I think, is one of the key drivers to how you're going to get better results out of your system. So, but you still need all of these things together. You need the content, you need the user interactions, and you need the ability to then go off and analyze those things. So what is Lucidworks Big Data? Well, in beta, it's a start on basically bringing you the goodness that is Hadoop with the goodness that is Lucidworks and Solr and Lucene, okay? We take care of all of the provisioning. We take care of all of the setup and scripts, et cetera, that you need to set up and run a larger scale cluster that combines the capabilities of Hadoop with the capabilities of Lucidworks Enterprise. So what you see kind of here in the, I guess I can do a pointer here. In this middle tier layer, obviously we have to have our good old-fashioned shards for our indexes, et cetera. So we're able to get all of your content in and indexed. And then over here, of course, we've got things like HDFS where you can go off and just store more and more data, and you can also have it primed for use in these large-scale computations that you're doing. Then I think one of the interesting pieces here is actually these logs in the middle, right? This is all of the things that is happening in your system, all of the ways users are interacting with your content. I think that's one of, again, the key underpinnings to all of this, right? Because you need to understand how people are interacting with your data in order for you to make sense of it. Just to complete the cycle here, we also have then HBase in there for using for key value stores and storing metrics. And then going up a layer, and I think this is where we start to, so this kind of forms this computational layer, or essentially the operating system layer of what we're doing. And then up higher here at the next layer, search, discovery, and analytics. There's actually some, I've picked a few of the highlights. Some of these things actually come with Solr already, and some of these things are things that we've built out around it. I'm partial to Mahout, of course, having started the Mahout project, but essentially how do we take this kind of computation platform and then start to overlay on top of it the ability to do analytics and machine learning on top of it so that you can start to organize this content so you can start to dig into what's going on in there. So tools like Mahout have things like clustering, et cetera, and classification tools and recommendation tools that make it easier for you to build out those kind of services. Pig is a nice little tool that essentially, one of the mottos of Pig is pigs can eat anything. Pig is a nice little tool that allows you to just kind of work through your data as you see fit without having to necessarily worry about exact getting raw formats into sequence files or whatever it is in Hadoop land. And then you can go and do all kinds of crazy things like joins, et cetera, on that data and then output it to something like HBase, or what we'll have in the future is output it back into your search system, okay? And then, across the top here, essentially, and along the sides is a lot of the glue that hopefully makes this easier for you so that you don't have to worry so much about what's going on underneath the hood here. We take things like Zookeeper and other capabilities and therefore give you the ability to know, for the system to know who's up and who's down and who's got what configurations, et cetera, so that you don't have to think about all of those things. And then, so this kind of layer over here is glue, and then up on top we give you REST-based APIs so that you can go and access that content, right? Over on the left-hand side, I think that's your left-hand side. Essentially, this is all about how do we get data into the system. This will be growing, of course, with future releases, but basically being able to take your content in from HDFS, from crawls, from Twitter streams, et cetera, or you can, of course, because it's Lucid and Solr underneath the hood, you can push your data in as well. And then down along the bottom, right now, we're using a couple of tools to kind of help with the monitoring and operations side of the coin so that, again, you don't have to think as much about that. We use Chef for provisioning all of this, spinning up your nodes, making sure they have the right things on them at the right time, whether it's a Hadoop data node or a Lucidworks Solr Cloud node. And then all of it right now we are hosting on Amazon. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute here. Some of the key features. At the end of the day, I think this is a lot about just marrying the capabilities of Hadoop more tightly with Solr. So how do we make sure that the content's indexed when it needs to be indexed? How do we make sure it's in Hadoop when it needs to be indexed? We take the time and have workflows that allow you to do those kinds of things without you having to worry about going out and building them. And then So that kind of creates the base layer, as I like to think about it. Then I think, you know, once you start to think about how do we get that analysis layer, so we're delivering some of those things to you out of the box as well. You can also, of course, this is open source, you know, since we're using open source tools like Hadoop, et cetera, you can also plug in things like your own MapReduce jobs or pig scripts, et cetera. We expose all of this stuff through REST-based APIs, so you can just talk JSON to it, which seems to be the preferred method these days for pretty much everybody. You can also, of course, have data that's in HDFS that's just in things like PDF files or Office documents, et cetera. So at the end of the day, what we have is what we think of as a pretty full stack that, in my opinion, reinserts search back into the big data equation. It's something I've felt and I've had reflected back to me from a number of analysts and press and various clients, et cetera, that they don't understand why search isn't part of the big data equation, why you don't see it on anybody's stack. I think what we're doing is we put that back front and center because I think it belongs there and should have been there right from day one, because if you actually look at the original Hadoop use case, it was for search, right? So now we still have that capability for building out indexes, but then use it for these other things that it's really good at too, like the log processing, et cetera. What we do then at the end is host it all for you. In many ways, what we're also trying to do is minimize the amount of effort people have to do these big data prototypes so that you can go try things out without you having to go off and provision all of your own hardware, get a whole team spun up, all of those things. You can just go and have a hosted test bed, and then when you're ready, you can bring it in-house. Drilling down a little deeper, some of the APIs. Of course, we give you the full power of Lucidworks and Solr, just like we always have. The bulk and near real-time index. We take care of all of the Solr cloud business for you. Okay, so we'll set up the shards. The system will set up its shards. You can spin up new nodes into there, and they'll automatically join the Solr cloud, et cetera. We've got predefined workflows for easing some of these common data tasks. Of course, this is something we'll be adding to over time as well. We take care of administration, so you have access to key system information, metrics, monitoring, et cetera, user management, those kinds of things. We also deliver it over, you can have it access it securely. Some of the analytics, we're starting from search outwards, so many of our analytics to begin with are geared around problems that people commonly have when they're deploying search-based solutions. We can talk some more about that later. But essentially this idea that you want to see those trends over time around how people are doing things. So you want to see what people are clicking on, when they're clicking on it, things like that. We've also started with some base capabilities around machine learning in terms of trying to help people with the discovery aspects of their data. So things like clustering, statistically interesting phrases, which are often commonly used to help enhance search capabilities. Essentially, you're starting to see us deploy out Mahout here, and there will be more to come in the near future. And then last but not least, with these notion of proxy APIs, we can't possibly think of everything right off the bat that you can do in Lucidworks and or Hadoop, so we want to expose some of those lower level APIs for you too. So for instance, with Web HDFS, you can just use REST APIs to put your data into HDFS, for instance. Underneath the hood a little bit more, in terms of setup, we're running Lucidworks 2.1, which was just released, I think, last month, which essentially is capturing a point-in-time release of what will be Lucene and Solr 4.0, which I'm told 4.0, and I've seen on the mailing list, should be coming fairly soon for all of you who are wondering about that. We set it up sharded with Solr Cloud. Some of the little lower level details of what you're seeing emerge as best practices around Solr Cloud. If you haven't heard about soft commits for near real time, we're doing pretty aggressive soft commits. That's actually turns out to give you nice access to all of your data that's coming in. We're also then backing that up with what are known as hard commits, but you'll notice that we don't actually open up searchers on the hard commit time. That allows you to essentially make sure that all of your data is truly flushed to disk. If not, you can still play off of the transaction log, et cetera. The nice thing about all of this is Solr takes care of just a lot of the details for this. I don't have to go and worry as much about any of those things. And if, just a shameless plug for one of my colleagues, Mark Miller, who's going to be giving a talk on what's happening in Solr Cloud next. As far as the what I call the SDA engine, just a little bit more details on there. Some things I think that are interesting, all REST-based. I really like the RESTlet project if you haven't tried that one out. Makes a lot of things just easy out of the box when it comes to building out REST APIs. For service discovery, service awareness, this is where Zookeeper is really great, but I would add on top of it that Netflix has actually been publishing some of their capabilities on top of Zookeeper. So if you haven't checked out the Curator project for Zookeeper, I would encourage you to do that. A lot of recipes for Zookeeper. We take in all of our APIs, of course, standard SSL kinds of things, basic auth over SSL for accessing. We'll probably be looking into other authentication and authorization schemes as we go forward. And I think I've covered pretty much everything else on there. In terms of the other pieces underneath the hood, some of the highlights of what we do with these things. We're using, of course, Hadoop. That gives us those large-scale bulk processing capabilities for ETL, et cetera, as well as calculating our metrics across large volumes of logs. We're using Mahout for things like clustering and phrases. HBase is where we store a lot of the results around our metrics. So that gives us things like time series, et cetera. It'll also be where we will be storing things like users' information that you want to put into the system so you can start to do things like personalization or recommendations. I mentioned Zookeeper and Pig already. Kafka is another emerging project that does, at Apache, that does pub sub. We're using that to actually make sure that all of our content that is all the logs from Lucidworks are being flowed back into HDFS so that we have access to them in an efficient way when we want to do all this log processing that we want to do. So as you can see here, basically taking and gluing together a lot of the existing open source capabilities and then looking to add a layer on top of that. So where does that then leave us, right? We've got this beta. We're ready to go in beta now. You can come and sign up, et cetera. It's what I would call minimally viable. I think we get a lot of the headaches out of the way in terms of setting these things up. But of course, you want to think about where can I go next? How is this going to help me in the long run? What we're thinking about in terms of where we're headed. I really think, obviously the next capabilities are around analytics. I still always, having search and natural language processing in my heart and what I've built my career on, I come at this again from the search outwards. So I want to look at how can I help make search more effective, and then from there, how can I then give you more and more capabilities so that you can do more things that aren't just search, right? So some of the themes around analytics are a lot around things like relevance. How do we improve relevance for people? How do we improve our understanding of the data quality of your system? I always go back to this is one of the first customers we ever had at Lucid Imagination. Very, very, very large company. You all know them. They were having, in our first day on site there, they were having problems finding, one of their key products was on like page 10 of their search results, right? And many of you have heard me tell this story before, but so we sat down with them and went through, it's got to be somewhere in Lucid, maybe this is something in Lucid, maybe we can tweak the way we're doing queries, et cetera. It turns out that, after looking at some of the explains and looking at their index and Luke and things like that, that key product didn't have one of its fields that they were searching on filled out, right? Whoever did the data entry on that system hadn't filled in the fact that that product was described by this. They missed putting in the keywords. They fixed that the next day. It was on page 1. And God knows how much more money they made off of that, right? Or maybe God and a few other people. So how can we help you make better sense of your data? How can we help you make sure you understand what's in your data? How can we look to give you and help you integrate with other packages? I'm a big fan of the R stats project. If you haven't checked that out and you like doing t-tests and statistical analysis and all of those good things, go check out R stats. So those are a lot of the themes, machine learning, et cetera. And then last but not least, and I think this will be of interest to especially Solr users and Lucid users, is how can we start to think about doing more things in the index itself, right? We do things like faceting already, and we can do spell checking, et cetera. So I think you'll start to see some contributions back into Solr and Lucid as well around being able to do things on essentially that aren't necessarily query related, but are driven by looking at what's in the index at a lower level than necessarily queries, right? So if you want to start doing things like co-occurrence analysis and other things to find out what terms commonly co-occur together, that could be something that you could do fairly easily in Lucid because you have all of the structures there. It's just not properly exposed in terms of how we access Lucid and Solr. Okay? So those are just kind of some of the themes that we're thinking about. And with that, I'm just going to leave it at that. We've got some links about how you can contact me. If you want to find out more about the beta, you can go up on the top link there. That'll take you to our website. And I'm open for a few questions. Looks like we've got about 5 minutes left before our next speaker. So the question was, what kind of support do we have around, people essentially provisioning the traditional different layers of dev through QA through production. So with all of the scripts that we have around provisioning through Chef and all of that, that stuff is actually fairly straightforward. So it's a matter of deciding how many of the clusters you want to have up and running, right? Obviously in the cloud, what we're first aiming at with the beta is that this is something that you can prototype on and you can figure out whether you like these particular tires before you buy them. And so in that case, you're probably just provisioning one of these clusters to get started with, but there really is no reason why you can't provision multiple, right? How big do we think the clusters will be? It's going to depend on what particular people are doing. We've got a couple of different sizes kind of spec'd out, kind of what I would call small, medium, large. I mean, in some cases, you're talking people just want to try out terabytes, or even gigabytes, so it's not actually that big to get started. But then, that's one of the beauties of using a service like Amazon, et cetera, is that you can then go and add more as you want to, right? So, it's really going to depend on what you as a customer want to do. Of course, there's, when you're in the cloud, there's the associated cost with it too, just like you would have anywhere else. So the question was, how much glue is there, right? And what kind of glue is it? Excuse me. I think most things are glued together already. We take it so that we've got the MapReduce jobs that do the indexing from HDFS, for instance, into Lucidworks. You don't have to think about those things. When you run your pig scripts or whatever, it's pretty straightforward to then put them into HBase for storing the metrics. For the ones that we provide already, those are already glued in, and the results go right back into HBase, for instance. And then with the APIs, you can just say, oh, go give me the analytic, give me the value for these for this analysis, or give me the values for this search, et cetera, right? Down at the, in particular for people who are interested in Lucid and Solr, et cetera, at the search layer level, that's all pretty much just pass through. We provide a pass through from our APIs down into search. So all of the requests, et cetera, that you're used to doing in Solr, for instance, you can still just do just as it was, right? All we do there is actually just put it in a JSON format, so you can essentially pass in your parameters that way. We also see that probably, that's one of the things I think too on the roadmap ahead is being able to hook into people's existing Solr capabilities, et cetera, but that's a little bit further down the road. Well, so in terms of the beta, I mean, for those kinds of things, we would have to be working together with the Lucid team on that. But I mean, essentially, we give you access to HDFS, et cetera, and so we would kind of lay out what file structures we have for you, and then you would be able to write jobs against that. And we can lay out where the various pieces are, so you understand how to do that. We also, of course, have examples, things like that. So. All right, with that, I thank you and look forward to talking with you. And if you have any more questions, I'll be around here all day.